I'm really going to enjoy this presentation. Like a chef in the kitchen preparing a meal, he tastes it and he knows as he enjoys it that his guests are also going to enjoy this meal. Well, friends, I want to speak to those who are professed Christians and for others who are planning to become Christians. Christ in Matthew 24 was asked this question in verse 3. What will be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the world? And in verse 4 through verse number 7, Christ gives sign and signs in the whole chapter. Now focus on verse number 7. Christ gave 4 signs: wars, famines, pestilences, earthquakes, which point to calamities in diverse places. Then Christ says, we must study a particular book in the Bible. In Matthew 24, verse 14 and verse 15, Christ says, study the book of Daniel. That means in the book of Daniel, we should find those 4 crises: the wars, the famines, the pestilences, and the calamities. In Matthew 24 and verse number 9, Christ speaks of all nations will unite to prosecute, persecute, and to kill his faithful people. That means in the book of Daniel, we must find the unification of nations in the world. Is that in the book of Daniel? Yes. That means in the book of Daniel, the nations should be seen uniting around these 4 great crises. And in the book of Daniel, it speaks of Babylon. And that word Babylon connects Daniel with the book of Genesis, the Tower of Babel. And Babylon connects Daniel with the book of Revelation. So friends, are you now interested? Are you intrigued? Are you interested? Curious? Are you hungry for this spiritual meal? Let's get right into it. Greetings, salutations to Safe to Serve International and first-time viewers. Welcome to this midday power surge, your spiritual oasis on this pilgrim journey. I'm your host, Andrew Henriquez. Let's get into it, my friends. There it is. In March 2024, the WHO member states agree to resume negotiations aimed at finalizing the world's first pandemic agreement. And today I'm going to address the fact that WHO is now threatening world leaders to accept and to sign on to this tyrannical pandemic treaty. And I'm going to warn you to be aware of the actual health test kits and also the nasal swabs. I'm going to be addressing these important points. Now, friends, watch carefully. The Bible tells us in Ecclesiastes chapter 1 and verse 9 that there's no new thing under the sun. So as you're seeing, the world's first pandemic agreement between the month of March 11, 2020 and May 11, 2023, we saw the pestilence pandemic. Don't you forget that. And here's the point I'm driving home. So the pandemic was seen within those months, 3.5 years, and now we're seeing nations uniting to prevent another pandemic or a greater pandemic. Allow me to confirm. There it is. Who urges countries to sign globalist pandemic treaty by May this month? Why? Because a new threat will emerge. Take a listen.
The next pandemic is not a question of if, but of when. And we cannot afford to repeat the same mistake of the past.
When the next pandemic comes knocking,
and it will, we must be ready to answer decisively, collectively, and equitably.
There it is. How do they know the next one will come? And how do they know it's going to be the big one? And that's why I always say, those who don't learn history are doomed to repeat it. Now, friends, I'm really going to enjoy this one. And I hope you also find clarity, enlightenment from these scriptures. I'm going to paint the picture clearly for those who desire to see it. Now, notice, the pandemic, they say, was between 2020, 2023. And now they're calling for the unification of nations to prevent another or a greater pandemic. We have seen this before. Nothing new under the sun. Where have we seen something similar? Do you remember? In the book of Genesis chapter 6 through chapter 9 of Genesis, was there a flood? A calamity, was there not? A great calamity. What happened thereafter? In chapter 10 and chapter 11 of Genesis, there was a unifying of all people and nations to erect the Tower of Babel. For what purpose? To prevent and to escape another great calamity. And Jesus said, as it was in the days of Noah, as it was in the time, the Tower of Babel, Babylon, so it is going to be in the last days. I'm really going to enjoy this one. There it is. In the middle, description of Noah. Left off the screen, the Tower of Babel, Nimrod. Do you see it, friends? It's clear. A nail in a sure place. So now who is modern Babel? Because Babel in the Bible, it represents Babylon. I'm going to repeat myself for those who are in the back of the room, in the back of the classroom. Here we have the pandemic, 2020, 2023. Now we are hearing every nation must sign on to this agreement to prevent, to preserve us from the next pandemic. Just as it was in the Bible, the flood, calamities, loss of property, loss of lives. Then came the Tower of Babel, uniting all peoples and nations and tongue. That's Genesis chapter 11, verse 1 through verse 9. I dare you to try and refute that. And if you try, you do that to your own demise. I'm going to enjoy this one. So who is modern Tower of Babel? It's Babylon, the papacy. Babel means Babylon. There it is, my friends. Babylon, the great, is fallen, is fallen. Babel in the book of Genesis. Babylon in the book of Revelation. There it is. And the Bible tells us Babylon is called the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. And who claims to be the mother church, the Roman Catholic Church. Babel, Babylon, that means popery is behind the WHO, tyrannical pandemic treaty. I'm going to prove it. Continue. The colors of Babylon in Revelation 17, verse 1 through verse 6. Read that for yourselves. There it is. Fulfilling modern Babylon, blasphemy, man who claims to be God on the earth, the so-called vicar of Christ. Move on. Antichrist. And Revelation 17:6 is being fulfilled. And although they apologize, they will not change. Babylon. With that in mind, notice here, they're telling us the pandemic treaty, the WHO, is the one that will be calling the shots in the case of another pestilence pandemic. Listen.
The World Health Organization is expected to finalise a new pandemic treaty, with talks underway until the 10th of May.
The pandemic treaty is that controversial blueprint for how the WHO and the international community will deal with future pandemics.
It means that the WHO is able to call the shots if there's any health emergency or potential health emergency anywhere in the world.
Yes. So if you're the one calling the shots, it simply means you are the one in charge, right? Not fully. 2 points. Picture a sporting event, a team on the field. The actual captain of that soccer football team may decide who takes the free kick, the penalty kick on the football turf. But on the bench. You see my point now? So even though the WHO may call the shots, who is behind the great puppet master? Who is it? My friend, the Bible tells us. It's facts. It's truth. Not conjecturing, not speculation. Look at this carefully, my friends. They're on the same team. Tedros, WHO, with the Pope of Rome. And this states the Holy See, the Vatican, the Antichrist power, yes, the Jesuit hierarchy. They have put money into the WHO's emergency fund. If they're funding it, that means they're shareholders. That means they are the ones calling the shots. The front organization does what is best for their shareholders. Get that straight? Who is the one that will be calling the shots? The Pope of Rome. Continue. And the Bible tells us they're all on the same team. The UN from left to right. The Pope, Antichrist, and WHO. Modern day Goliaths. But David is in the corner with 5 smooth stones. And the Bible tells us that Babylon is connected to sorcery. Babylon and the merchants are promoting sorcery. Sorcery, pharmakia. Sorcery, poisons. You see that, friends? WHO is a health organization. And the Bible says it's Babylon that controls pharmakia, big pharma. The Bible said so. Not a talking head on social media. The Bible said so. I'm really going to enjoy this one. And we're told the work of Jesuits, even the Black Pope, the Superior General of the Jesuits, Arturo Sosa. There it is, friends. They're the ones who call the shots. And they have front organizations. And the WHO is one of the Jesuits' front organization to take over, to control the world, to enslave the masses.
Hi, it's Dana Horchowski. It is October the 9th, 2009, and I'm going to read you The Secret Covenant. I only have 10 minutes. It's on the Polly Hicks section of CanadaStreetNews.com, and this is dedicated to the Jesuits, the High Freemasons, and the High Knights of Columbus, and those that have pledged a blood oath allegiance to the Luciferians, secret societies. The Secret Covenant.
And those who speak against them
to he who speaks.
Will be killed. Will be killed.
Death will come to he who speaks. Death will come to he who speaks.
Imagine that. And you could see the great puppet master. Diana in the chat writes, if our country signs on to this tyrannical pandemic treaty, it will spell the end of our freedom, and I concur. Eileen writes, my people, Jesus says, perish for a lack of knowledge. Hosea chapter 4 and verse 6. Here it is now, friends, we're told this diabolical pandemic treaty will lead the nations into a totalitarian society.
While the draft treaty doesn't give the WHO direct authority over the country's domestic pandemic policies, it contains numerous ruinous provisions that would push nations to adopt an authoritarian globalist mindset for handling future disease outbreaks. The accord.
That's it. It's going to circumvent Congress. Yes. It tramples underfoot the rights enshrined in the U.S. Constitution.
The accord is a problem because it, A, circumvents Congress, so there's no approval, and it's legally binding.
It gives.
Do you see that, my friends? And when you hear those words, what comes to your mind? I'm going to say it to you now. What did Christ say in Matthew 24? I'm going to be redundant. What will be the sign of thy coming and the end of the world? Christ gave the sign and also gave signs in Matthew 24. He mentions 4 crises: wars, famines, pestilences, calamities. Verse 9, he says, all nations will unite to persecute my people. So in the book of Daniel, I'm really going to enjoy this. We must see in the book of Daniel the unification of nations to preserve themselves from a calamity. Do we see that? Here it is, my friends. Daniel chapter 2. I love this. Verse 41 to verse 45. Look at verse 41. It says, but there shall be in it, stop right there. I'll come back to verse 41. Look at verse 43, second sentence. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with the miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men. And the Bible now says, in the days of these kings, as they are mingling with the seeds of men, the God of heaven shall set up a kingdom, the second coming of Christ. My friends, what does the word mingle mean? The root word for mingle in the Hebrew, it means meddle. It means to sign treaties, to sign pledges. And that's what you see going on in the world. To combat pestilences, let's sign this treaty. You see it now, friends? The pandemic treaty, which will unite all nations on the earth. And that's what Daniel 2 says. The iron mixed with miry clay will mingle themselves with the seed of men, the nations. And then the Bible says, in the days of these kings, kings are leaders of nations. They will be uniting. Is Matthew 24 being fulfilled? I'm really going to enjoy this one. Is Matthew 24 being fulfilled? And this is what the talking heads on social media cannot share with you because they don't see the dots connected. Now, it says iron and miry clay. These are symbols. So who is the iron representing in the toes of the image? The iron represents popery. Look at verse 41 of Daniel 2. But there shall be in it of the strength of the iron. And that's how I'm going to confirm with you now. So in the mingling of the nations, to unite, the Bible says the chief element is the iron. And the iron in the toes of the image represents popery. The WHO is a front organization. It's popery behind the scenes. And what did Nebuchadnezzar see in vision from God? He saw a stone was dispatched to destroy the nations. Today we'll call that calamities, pestilences, wipe out the nations and lives. But Nebuchadnezzar built an image of all gold to defy God. He was a rebel at this point. So again, who is in and behind the WHO pandemic treaty? The iron. It's popery in the mix. And that's why we're told now, we have come to a time when God's sacred work is represented by the feet of the image in which the iron was mixed with miry clay. The clay represents the nations in one sense. And then will come the spurious Sabbath, Sunday worship by law. I hope this is substantive to your mental consumption. I'm in the kitchen today. Let's move on here listen to this.
It gives the...
Because now you're going to see one more nail in their coffin. The WHO will control the supply chain. The WHO will control all merchandise. Yes. Control all of the transactions in the whole world by this treaty. Watch this.
It gives the WHO authority over the global supply chain, trade, commerce.
It also regulates IP. It affects pricing of goods. I mean, no sovereign nation would want to do that.
They will
So who does the Bible say will control all commerce, all trade, all merchandise? The Bible does not say the WHO. Christ says, study the book of Daniel. And Daniel mentions Babylon. Who is Babylon in the last days? Come on, talk to me. It's potpourri, Revelation 18. Oh, friends, the food is appetizing to our mental consumption here. Chapter 18 of Revelation, verse 11 through verse 13, it's Babylon behind the scenes, along with the merchants controlling the merchandise to enslave the masses. That's a kneel in a sure place. Let's continue here. And now they're telling us, friends, expect intrusive, abusive surveillance and censorship wrapped up in this so-called pandemic treaty. It is not a utopia. It will bring a dystopian society. Watch this.
They will obligate all of the countries who in the world, the 194 countries who are parts of the World Health Organization, to surveil our citizens, and then also it would obligate us to censor any misinformation or disinformation.
Our rights should be protected by our constitution and our laws, not subcontracted to international bodies, especially as discredited as the WHO is.
And notice who is on the scene publicly, the main figure, bringing nations together to save Mother Earth. The Pope of Rome, Daniel 2, Matthew 24. All right, listen, censorship, Tedros of WHO. This is what I call the return of the Jesuit Inquisition.
The stigma and discrimination can be as dangerous as any virus and can fuel the outbreak. As we have seen with COVID-19, misinformation and disinformation can spread rapidly online. So we call on all social media platforms, tech companies, and news organizations to work with us to prevent and counter harmful information.
Censorship. Here is Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann. She went to an actual gathering and they were speaking about the policies of the WHO.
Congresswoman Bachmann, tell us a little bit about what you experienced when you went to Geneva, Switzerland, and were a part of at least the audience listening to all the things going on at the World Health Organization.
Surveillance and censorship. Michelle Bachmann.
Media. That's why the global amendments and the pandemic treaty envision shutting down even alternative media. Everyone has to be in compliance with the message given out by global government. And that will be within the year that they'll start on these restrictions on speech. And so that's why use our speech as long as we can.
Mercy. And that's why it's time for aggressive, effective evangelism on social media, online, in the virtual space, as well as going door to door. Street evangelism. Notice now the actual growing consensus response to this so-called pandemic treaty. Headline reads, vote no to any pandemic treaty put forward by the WHO. And here is Tedros and the WHO leaders. They're panicking. Why are they panicking? Why are they about to have an anxiety attack? Maybe a heart attack, a stroke? Because their diabolical agenda is stalling. And they have a time frame to to get their slavery enacted. Here he is lamenting, oh, misinformation, disinformation. He's of the devil.
The second major barrier is the torrent of fake news, lies, and conspiracy theories about the pandemic agreement.
Panicking.
That it's a power grab by WHO, that it will give WHO power to impose lockdowns or vaccine mandates on countries or stop travel, that it is an attack on freedom.
Listen.
These claims, as you know, are completely false.
Listen.
WHO does not have the power to impose anything on anyone. We don't want it, and we're not trying to get it. The agreement has been written by countries.
Listen.
For countries, and will be implemented in countries in accordance with their own national laws, just like other international agreements. And just like other international agreements, it won't give WHO any power over sovereign states.
Yeah, it's all about semantics. Oh, the WHO will not take away your sovereignty as a nation. Anyway, all you nations come and sign this accord. In other words, whatever is in that policy, by extension, whatever the nations implement are coming from the accord, the agreement, the policy, the treaty. So indirectly, the WHO will be stripping away sovereignty, semantics. He's skewing the issues. He really thinks we are buffoons. Watch this. Here comes the fear-mongering now. The sky is falling. More pestilence are coming because they have to use the strong arm tactic. Ring in your arm. Come and sign this agreement. Watch this. The second human case of bird flu confirmed in Michigan. Second human case of bird flu linked to dairy cows found in Michigan. Take a listen. First it was Texas, now it's Michigan. You haven't seen anything yet. Watch this.
Back here in the U.S. tonight, the CDC confirming a second human case of bird flu in this country. The first case in Texas, the second case in Michigan. Here's ABC's Alex Perez.
And what's that date? May 22nd, 2024. And the CDC is now warning of more U.S. bird flu cases and the second human infected by cows. It's coming, fear-mongering. And that's why Hillary writes in the chat, the greatest case of misinformation and disinformation during the pandemic were the blatant lies peddled by WHO and others that the actual inoculation were effective. 70 Americans in one state are now being monitored. Not only in America. Look now at the land down under, Australia. Reports first human avian flu infection, May 22nd, 2024. Fear-mongering because they need the nations to sign on. Fear-mongering. Take a listen here, friends.
A Victorian child is confirmed to be the first human case of a rare and dangerous bird flu in Australia. As Mimi Becker explains, an egg farm in Victoria detected a different strain of the virus and is now in quarantine.
CSIRO has confirmed the strain of bird flu to be the H7N7, which is different to the current global outbreak. It's understood around 400,000 chickens have had to be put down after bird flu was detected at an egg farm near Meredith in the west of Victoria. Specialist teams have been seen at that property dressed in hazmat suits conducting more testing there. There is, of course, strict quarantine measures in place around that property and in other farms in the area, as there is a high possibility it may have already spread. But
did I hear the word quarantine? Did I hear the word quarantine? For some people, when they hear of pestilences, one more virus, and quarantine, they have what we call post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Those of you who are live in the chat, just remind the rest of us the trauma that people went through during the pandemic. I'll start you off. Many people could not visit their sick and dying loved ones in hospitals, in nursing homes. I'll give you one more. I need your comments. Churches were closed. Businesses closed. You were forced to put a swab up your nostrils. You couldn't travel. PTSD. Did I hear quarantine? And friends, to get their agenda, they are going to be more diabolical, more satanic, more sinister. We haven't seen anything yet. The devil is putting out all the stops. Watch this. And now we're being told scientists here in America are manufacturing the next pestilence pandemic. Not my words. Legacy media is saying that. Not my words. It's there. And now states, we're being told, must get ready with bird flu testing kits. All right, here's where I'm going to warn you now. Reuters. US CDC says bird flu risk is low, but asks states to be ready with testing. Friends, I'm going to warn you one more time. Be aware of the testing kits. Be aware of these nasal swabs. CDC asks states to be ready with bird flu testing. Take a listen again to the actual president of where was that? That was not Rwanda. Tanzania. Amen. Tanzania, who mysteriously died. Whenever I repeat something, it's because I'm going to go deeper on the point. Here he is, John Magufuli. He sent samples to his laboratory. Samples from car oil, papaya, fruits, birds, and labeled the specimens with human names to deceive the actual scientists in the lab. And the scientists said all of these specimens had the pestilence 19 infection. Fruits had it. Not on the outside. No, they swabbed, injected the fruit on the inside and drew the samples from the fruits on the inside. And the fruits on the inside was tested positive for C19.
Tulichukua sample za mbuzi, tukachukua sample za kondoo, tukachukua sample za papai, tukachukua sample za oili ya gari na sample za vitu vingine mbalimbali, tukavipeleka pale kwenye maabara bila wao kujua na tukazi.
Just read the words below. There it is.
Either zile sample zinazoletwa kwa sababu mpaka reagent zinatoka nje, mpaka zile swabs. Zile vipamba vya kuweka kwenye nani mle vinatoka nje.
Swabs.
Kwa hiyo lazima kuna kitu fulani kinafanywa.
What's going on here? So in other words, he says, beware of the swabs. The swabs in people's nostrils were imported. And he's questioning, why are people testing positive when these samples didn't come from people? They actually came from fruits. Could it be the swabs were infected? And now he goes to the laboratory and the testing kits. Read the words.
Sina uhakika sana na mkuu wa maabara hii kama anafahamu, kwa sababu hata tulipokuwa tunapeleka zile sample hatakumjulisha. Yeye amepima akijua ni sample za binadamu. Lakini kwa nini na yeye hakufanya trial kwenye siku za nyuma ili kujustify kile kifaa anachokitumia? Kwa hiyo kuna mambo mengi ya ovyo ovyo humu ndani.
Nonsense. That's it. Listen what he says now.
Kwa hiyo ukishagundua kitu hiki, lazima ujue kuna mchezo wa ajabu unafanyika kwenye vipimo hivi. Kwamba kuna mambo ya ajabu yanafanywa katika nchi hii. Either wahusika wa laboratory ile wamenunuliwa.
Friends, it's in this clip, which I'm going to confirm, which was not in the previous video when I covered this. John Magufuli stated Is it that the scientists in the laboratories who are faking the reports and the results from tests, were they paid by men with money from different countries? That's what he asked. That's what he's intimating. His own scientists were bought and sold to give reports and results that were falsified. Read the words below.
Ukishagundua kitu hiki, lazima ujue kuna mchezo wa ajabu unafanyika kwenye vipimo hivi.
Test kits.
Kwamba kuna mambo ya ajabu yanafanywa katika nchi hii. Aidha wahusika wa laboratory ile wamenunuliwa na mabeberu. Aidha hawana utaalamu, which is not true, kwa sababu maabara hii imetumika sana kwenye magonjwa mengine.
Mercy. Listen what he said next.
Lakini natoa wito kwa wale wanaotumia.
He's warning the other African countries, be careful of these equipments that you're importing to be used for testing.
Lakini natoa wito kwa wale wanaotumia vifaa hivi hasa katika Afrika. Wachukue sample za wanyama. Wachukue sample hata za kitu kichochote, hata liukuta, hata mjusi. Wachukue anything. Watakuja kuprove haya ninayoyazungumza.
And of course, we know what happened in closing.
Wanasayansi hatujafanya cha kutosha katika hili. Kwa hiyo kuna watu kutokana na extrapolation ya hizi information nilizonazo, lazima kuna watu wameambiwa positive wakati si wagonjwa wa corona. Na inawezekana wengine wakafa kwa hofu.
The results were falsified.
Papai lile lipo.
And of course, my friends, we're told that right there, what happened to him? Mysteriously, he died. Now, as I bring that point out, I want to make this point very clear for those of you who are listening. I can see what God is doing with this so-called signing of the pandemic treaty by all these various nations. Why is it we're seeing a pushback? That means the protest is real. The protest is having an effect. Headline reads, senators saying, do not support expanding the WHO pandemic authority. Congressmen are saying this WHO new pandemic response treaty is dead on arrival. May 2nd, 2024. What's happening? I believe God is holding back the winds of strife just a little longer. I hope you're watching this, comprehending this. Now I'm appealing to you. Because for as many of us are not ready, physically, mentally, spiritually, financially, and socially, we're unprepared. Listen to me attentively as I go back to Matthew 24. What will happen once all nations unite around these four crises? The wars, the famines, the pestilences, and the calamities. God's people in verse 9 will be brought before the public shame. We are going to be prosecuted. It is then that we will have to give the reason for our faith. Do we know what we believe? Are we able now to articulate what we believe? How much time do you spend in prayer? How much time do you spend in Bible studies? When you attend church in person, online, is it just a form, a show, a ritual, a ceremony? Or are you taking it seriously? Do you share what you now believe? Are you as a husband preparing your wife and children? Mothers, are you preparing your children to be like Daniel, Ananiah, Mishael, Azariah? Or are we proud and arrogant like Peter? We are about to deny Christ 3 times and fail. And that's why Christ is holding back the winds of strife. Don't let all nations unite yet. Don't bring the last crisis. Yes, Daniel says, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they will not cleave one to another, as iron is not mixed with miry clay. But will they attempt? Yes. Will they prosecute God's people? Yes. Will they persecute God's people? Yes. How do I know? In Daniel 3, what happened to Ananiah, Mishael, and Azariah? Did Babylon unite all the princes in Daniel 3 and say to preserve our nation? We don't want the stone to hit us. Modern application. No more pandemics. No more climate change. Let's all bow down and worship this image. All nations bowed. They were all in league, a working synergy. What happened to those 3 Hebrew boys? Were they called to defend their faith? Lord have mercy. So what is God doing now? Holding back the winds of strife. Senators saying, vote no. Am I ready to say like the 3 Hebrews? King, we would not bow to those policies. King, we would not worship that image. That's Daniel. In Revelation chapter 13, it mentions the worshiping of the image. Verse 15 through verse 17, you can buy, you can sell, except you receive the mark of the beast. Why was that done? To combat and to preserve Babylon from falling. Daniel 2 and Daniel 3, God is holding back the winds of strife. I'm really enjoying this. Are you? Is God speaking to your heart? Let me shine a spotlight on Christ. Did the nations unite to capture Christ? Yes. In Luke 23 and verse 12, the Bible says, Pilate and Herod were at enmity, but to crucify Christ, they became friends. All nations came together to crucify Christ. Was Christ brought in a judgment hall to defend his faith? Yes, he was. The saints will go through it. Luke 21, verse 12 through verse 22. Am I ready? Are you ready, my friends? Young people, youth, get back to the Bible. Get back to the reading and study of the spirit of prophecy. Go on a Bible reading program. The schedule is on our website, prophesy-again.org. There's no excuse. Stop playing games. How much longer must God hold back the winds of strife? In Luke 21, verse 12 through verse 19, God says, I'll give you a mouth and wisdom. You will speak from me in that time. The adversaries would not be able to gainsay nor resist that truth. Get ready. But now, verse 20 through verse 22. Christ says, when you shall see Jerusalem surrounded with armies, flee to the mountains. That's why I said we are not yet prepared physically. Are we in the right location? God is holding back the winds of strife. It's time to implement the 5 keys of survival. I'm appealing. Conversion, country living, food, water, resources on your property. Evangelism, number 4. Number 5, assisting those who are less fortunate. How much longer can God withhold the winds of destruction, the coming crisis? How much longer? How much longer? How much longer? By God's grace, I leave it there. It's time to be sealed. He's holding back the winds of destruction. Chapter 7 of Revelation, verse 1 through verse 3. What stood out to you today? If you are blessed by the spiritual meal, give the video a thumbs up and share it with others. And by God's grace, I'll see you tomorrow at 12 noon Eastern for midday power surge. It's evident now. The Lord wants to come. He's soon to come. Let's not just speak about getting ready, but be found ready, getting others ready. Maranatha, and the protest continues.